All right, we're talking today about fiber as class evidence. So if you remember, class evidence means that there's not one individual unique fiber we're looking at. It can be a whole bunch of fibers that we're looking at. So if it's like this denim jacket, it's not like they made, let's see, this is Gap. It's not like Gap went, we're only going to make the one. They make several. And so you can make statistical analysis about different class evidence, and you can do tests on it, but it's from a bunch of different ones. So it does not possess a sufficient number of unique individual characteristics to be associated with one particular person. So to kind of preempt this, I wanted to share a story about a serial killer. So sit back. It started in May 21st, 2003. And there was a 16-year-old girl named Sophia Silva in the DC area. She was sitting on her front porch. She was doing her homework and she was abducted. And that's the last place people had seen her. And 5 weeks later, her body turned up in a creek. And they had no evidence. They couldn't find anything to link anyone to the murder. 8 months later, it happened again. It was like 70 miles difference from the original murder. But there were two girls. I want to get their names right. I don't care about the murderers' names, but the girls, Katie and Kristen Lisk. So they were 12 and 15 at the time, and they rode the bus home, and they were abducted when they got off the bus. And there were no witnesses, no evidence, except for a few tiny fibers and a couple of strands of hair. So there was one investigator that's like, these are linked. I know these are linked. So he kind of looked into it, and they actually ended up doing like 10,000 tests on 3 hairs and 190 fibers found from these three cases of death, and didn't come up with any matches. So remember, we've got perpetrators in the system already that we can compare against, and they couldn't find anything. Well, they did kind of, in a way, get lucky, because there was another girl that was abducted, and she was abducted by a guy named Richard Mark Evanitz, and he was 38 years old at the time when they found it. But a girl was abducted, and he took her to his apartment, raped her continuously, like did over and over an 18-hour period, and she escaped. Yes. So she escaped. And then when she came back, she had some blue fibers on her, and the original cases had some pink fibers on them. And when she escaped, they started to do matches with what she had on her and what was found on those other cases. And then they were able to go into the apartment. Good news. The dude shot himself. So good. But they went into the apartment looking for the blue fibers and pink fibers, and there was a pink bath rug, and the girl that was abducted that escaped actually had some handcuffs on that had like blue fuzzy fibers on it that they were able to attribute back to this guy. And so they said, yeah, he was the perp for all 4. So fiber can be a way that we nab killers. So we're going to talk about fibers today. All right, so fiber analysis is a method of identifying and examining fibers used by law enforcement agencies around the world to procure evidence during an investigation. So fiber analysis is also used by law enforcement agencies to place suspects at the scene of the crime, like this case I've told you. These are the characteristics that you'll try to identify. So here we have color, texture, diameter, the shape pattern, cross-sectional appearance. And sometimes it's a matter of matching them up and looking statistically, how likely is this to happen? And then they can get into some really in-depth analysis. I tried to pick out some different fabrics for this. So I found this ribbon that's very sparse. There's, it's just not really, it's not a lot of density to this. And then I just picked a dish towel that's like a cotton dish towel. Okay, so tests are done for things like tensile strength, and tensile strength is just the resistance needed to tear it or break something. And I wanted to pick something that was kind of an easy example to show you. Here are some very loosely packed fibers. If I were to really go at it, we could probably tear this pretty easy. And there are some that are a little more densely packed like this. So we're looking for tensile strength. Can we tear it? We're looking at density, how tightly packed those fibers are. And there are some chemical tests that can be performed as well. And most of these, if you look at these different chemical reagents, will destroy the sample. So if we have enough of it, we're fine to do some microchemical tests. They will take like samples of carpet. They'll actually cut it out, even if it's like you'll have to replace the carpet in some cases. But they'll take it so they can actually do some fiber matching. Okay, so natural fibers, like this shirt I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see it. It comes from animals or plants. So this is actually a cotton shirt. Think of wool from sheep or cotton from cotton plants. Man-made, think of your Lululemon leggings, which are usually nylon lycra combinations. The nylons are a family of materials called polyamides that react with carbon-based chemicals found in coal and petroleum in high pressure. So they're man-made with chemical reactions, in that particular case, known as condensation, polymerization. I don't even know if I probably botched that word, but it forms a large polymer in the form of a sheet of nylon. So I was thinking of doing like how it's made, but then I was like, there's something way more interesting for you to research. So we're going to do that. Okay. So cotton is the most commonly used plant fiber. Wool is the most frequently used animal fiber. Here are other examples of fibers. So we have some plant fiber, flax. This is this is my hemp purse. So this is another plant fiber. If Cruella de Vil got her way, then maybe on this right-hand list we would have 101 Dalmatians, but glad the Dalmatians won that little battle. Wool blend socks would be a good example for this one, where you say like more than half of all fibers used are synthetic fibers. So it's not like when you get a pair of wool socks, the majority of wool socks aren't just going to be straight wool. It would be really itchy and probably uncomfortable, but it's usually mixed with something like a polyester or spandex. So half of all fibers use synthetic fibers like that. Polymers make up many of the materials in living organisms, including, for example, proteins, cellulose, and nucleic acid. So these are all characteristics of synthetic fibers. So important when you're testing it to see exactly what they're made from. I was thinking of, if you actually want to, if you have spare time, and we're quarantined, so if you're this bored, I kind of feel bad for you, but there is a video, if you wanted to see, they do take plastic bottles from like water bottles, and they can create cloth. They can regenerate it into clothing, which is absolutely amazing to me. So not necessarily on this site, but if you wanted to see like how cloth is made artificially, and you can find some videos like how it's made when plastic bottles are actually created into clothing, which is pretty interesting. And this is showing you using the wood or the cotton pulp and using an ionic liquid. Eventually you're going to get to a cellulosic fabric. So interesting what they can do to make our clothes. So fibers can be compared macroscopically by looking at the naked eye and just seeing how different they are individually, or we can look at them microscopically, and we can look at them from different angles microscopically for common characteristics. So you can see that cotton all looks the same and wool has just a different characteristic look about it. Okay, the pattern of the fabric, including again how densely packed it is, can be a source for comparison as well. How the weave is, in some cases, like we've got some weaves like this where you've got 1 under 2 fibers, 1 under 2 kind of a deal, or 1-to-1 ratios, or sometimes they have like fibers that look like a fish kind of. So when we talk about when we're talking about the linen that they believe, that some people believe that Christ was laying in, Those ones have more of like the fish characteristics to the linen, the way that the fabric lays. Okay, we can look at the cross-sectional shape, and that can improve the likelihood that we have a match if we have two different kinds of fibers coming into play. We can look at the angles using our naked eye, and then obviously using a microscope. So another fun story, I guess, about fabrics is there is what's called the Shroud of Turin. So also called the Turin Shroud. It's a length of linen cloth that bears a negative image of a man. Some claim the image depicts Jesus of Nazareth, and the fabric is the burial shroud in which he was wrapped after crucifixion. So after people died, if you look at this next slide, they would lay the deceased on a linen, and they would cover them with the linen. So that's what this is. This is the Shroud of Turin. Still a lot of back and forth, and people deciding, like, is this really the Shroud of Turin that was in Christ's tomb, or isn't it? And they actually have done some forensic analysis on this, and it's something like, I'm going to give you a little bit of like front story to it, but this is going to be where we go with the assignment, because I feel like this was, I mean, it's super old and very interesting, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at this. And when we look at the Shroud of Turin a little bit closer, this is the one that was on the top of the person's body. And so right here, we kind of have the shape of a face, and you can see little spots of what they think is blood stains. There's another one here, and some of the cloth was burned or destroyed, and just the time frames where they had it, where ashes kind of fell onto it. So where you can see little holes and stuff there, it was from burning, basically. And so they've got some other fabric that's in certain parts, but this was where the face was. And if you kind of look, this is going to be the thoracic region, and then they had hands and arms coming down, kind of hanging down over the groin area. But they were like, this was something that was used on a person. So and then they started to do some fiber analysis on it. And what they found is that the weave of the Shroud of Turin is rich in gold color under high magnification of microscope. So they're looking at the fiber analysis to see, like, what did this type of fiber, was this used in the time frame? They also were sort of looking at, well, there is this facial imprint that they think could be the facial imprint of Christ. And they also have, like, some people will look at these specific stains, and they liken it to the crown of thorns. So there are some websites here that you can visit when you do your research, and I encourage you to find as many as you can. Okay, so they have done things like use an electron microscope, and they have determined that there are some things on this linen that come from a mammal, and specifically a human. And so they're like, yeah, there was at least a human that touched it. And then they started to look at, like, well, wait, is this blood that we're seeing? And so this is where the hands are crossed right here. And so people are saying, well, this could be the mark of one of the nails. So they were saying, is it blood or is it paint? And this is something you're going to research, because I didn't want to give you my answer because it's kind of controversial still. There are people that still are in the camp of, this is it. These are the linens that were in that tomb. And other people that were like, nope, no, it isn't. So I want you to actually do the research and see what you think. This is medical forensics from way back. So pretty fascinating stuff. They also did... they examined the human and non-human DNA found when the shroud and its backing cloth were vacuumed. They did a vacuum of this cloth in 1977 and again in 1988. And after sequencing some DNA of pollen and dust found on the shroud, they confirmed that many people from different places came in contact with this cloth, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so the Turin Shroud, in some cases, people think was faked by Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci. So they think he used pioneering photographic techniques and a sculpture of his own head. And then because the facial features on this linen look very similar to Da Vinci, they kind of think that it was him that created this linen cloth. So it's a mystery. And there are several documentaries on this topic, and it's a good topic for you guys to actually go into. So I'm going to just ask a simple question: is the Turin shroud, or the Shroud of Turin, from the tomb, or do you think that maybe it is not? And I want you to base it in evidence, and I want you to have sources. So that's going to be the assignment today. I actually want you to go into that. Maybe if you have family members that know the story, you can talk it over with them and get a good backstory on it before you start your research. There are a lot of YouTube videos if you're a visual learner. There are lots and lots of resources out there, websites that I kind of included earlier in the PowerPoint. But this is one we're going to do a little medical forensics research and see what you come up with. So, continue to find my stuff on the announcement, or in the announcement section on Canvas, and we'll see you next time.